One of my grandfathers told me that when he was in the child line at the Pawnee boarding school, that one of his classmates started to sing a Native American church song, and one of the disciplinarians who worked at the school heard him and came up and hit that young man inside the head, and the boy lost his hearing. So these schools, this type of discipline was imposed, and nothing happened to the people who committed these abuses against the children. Boarding schools were a product of federal Indian policy. The plan was to destroy Indian culture, and the youth were targeted. Boarding schools were formed as a part of a campaign of the U.S. government of ethnocide, the plan to destroy Indian culture. These people who were formulating policy thought that the best way to change Indian culture was to get at the youth. So youth were targeted to separate them from their tribal relatives, their parents, their clan members, their religious leaders, their medicine men, and to isolate them in places, in places where they could be remade into the image of the white man. The plan was to destroy the integrity of Indian culture by forcing Indian children to live in accordance with white American standards. Many people suffered trauma from these boarding schools. The children learned punishment for their children, which was to beat them when they stepped out of line. So these boarding schools impacted Indian customary forms of disciplining their children.
Historical trauma, according to Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, is the cumulative emotional and psychological wounding experienced over a lifetime or across generations. And it's also focused on group trauma. And when you look at it in the context of boarding schools, it fits into that, because when you have children that are taken away from age 4 to 12 and taken away from the safety of their home, their culture, their language, their community, their family, and forcibly taken and placed into an institution which is trying to actually destroy that identity and destroy those things, you can see the traumatic, or you can feel the traumatic effects of being forced to forget, who you are. And then compounded by, when it's compounded by emotional, psychological, sexual abuse that some of the kids experienced, you see this widespread trauma that's related to the boarding schools. On the other side of that, you also see the communities being going through this traumatic experience in the context of separation and disenfranchisement, because their kids are being forcibly taken away, and they're having to deal with that separation. And so when you look at it in the context of the boarding schools and historical trauma, they play into one another very well, because it is that cumulative emotional and psychological wounding of that community, of that group, and it's over generations, because the boarding schools had an impact on over 3 or 4 generations.